Okay, let's dive right into this because today we're tackling a genuinely massive foundational topic: revolution and the rights of citizenship. If you're a seventh grade history student, or honestly just someone fascinated by how nations are literally built from the ground up, you are in the exact right place. We're going to be acting as historical detectives today in this explainer, looking really closely at the rising tensions that birthed a brand new nation and, well, the incredibly complicated realities of what came next. So here's the essential question we really need to figure out. Why do people rebel? And how do societies actually define rights after a revolution? This isn't just some boring question for a history test. It's practically the fundamental puzzle of the American founding. When the colonies finally decided they'd had enough of British rule, they didn't just have to fight a whole war. They had to figure out what on earth came next. Tearing down a government? Sure, that's one thing. But how do you actually decide who gets rights and how those rights are protected once the dust finally settles? Keep this question right in the back of your mind as we analyze our evidence today. Real quick, here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, why do people rebel? Then, using a document organizer. Third, debating the Constitution. After that, we'll be modeling a worked response, followed by a misconception check on equal rights, and wrapping up with a final exit question. Starting off with Section 1, why do people rebel? We're kicking things off with the Declaration of Independence. Now, this is the document that officially outlined exactly why the colonies were rebelling against Britain. But it's not just a giant breakup letter to King George. It is a profoundly important philosophical statement. It contains some of the earliest, most powerful ideas about the rights of everyday citizens, ideas that would go on to have massive long-term impacts across the entire world. Understanding the core purpose of this document is absolutely crucial because it sets the ideological baseline for literally everything the revolutionaries were fighting for. They were fighting for the idea of rights. But as we'll see, actually putting those ideas into practice, that was a whole different challenge. Let's move to Section 2 and see how this builds. We're looking at using a document organizer. Whenever you're faced with massive, complicated historical documents, you absolutely need a reliable way to break them down. It's kind of like sorting pieces of a giant puzzle. This organizer perfectly contrasts the Declaration of Independence with the Constitution. Look at their main purposes. The Declaration is all about explaining why the rebellion is happening, while the Constitution, on the other hand, is rolling up its sleeves to create the actual rules for a functioning new government. And regarding rights, the Declaration gives us these soaring, idealistic visions of equal rights, whereas the Constitution gets into the nitty-gritty legal guarantees, which, as it turns out, rely really heavily on compromises. Which brings us to Section 3. Debating the Constitution. Look, if you think politics is argumentative today, man, you should have been a fly on the wall when they were drafting the Constitution. On one hand, there were these intense, fiery debates over representation and taxation. Large states and small states were practically at each other's throats. I mean, think about it. How many representatives should a state get in the new government? How should taxes be calculated? These definitely weren't small disagreements. They legitimately threatened to tear the brand new nation apart before it even got off the ground. But countering all that drama was the absolute, desperate need for a unified government. They knew for sure that if they didn't figure this out, the whole grand experiment of American independence would just completely fail. The only way forward? Compromise. Now, what's really interesting about this is how they actually saved the Union. The delegates made 3 major constitutional compromises. First up, representation in the legislature. They had to find a delicate balance so the large states didn't just completely overpower the small states. Second, they had to agree on taxation rules among the states so this new federal government could, actually afford to function. But the third compromise, that's the heaviest one: the institution of slavery. In order to get the southern states to agree to the new government, the founders made devastating legal compromises that explicitly embedded and protected slavery right within the new nation's rulebook. Moving right along to Section 4, modeling a worked response. Okay, listen up, because this framework is basically your golden ticket for historical writing. When you're asked to evaluate a source or a big historical event, just follow these 3 concrete steps. Step 1, make a claim. Tell me exactly which compromise you're focusing on and what you think about it. Step 2, cite evidence. Don't just give me your opinion. Actually pull a specific fact or a clause right out of the Constitution to back it up. Prove it. And step 3, which is honestly the most important part, evaluate the consequence. This is where you explain the real-world impact of that compromise on society. Did it solve the problem? Did it create new, maybe even worse problems down the line? By using this exact framework, you aren't just memorizing and reciting facts. You are thinking and arguing exactly like a real historian. Time for Section 5, Misconception Check on Equal Rights. So, wait a minute. Did everyone just get equal rights immediately after the revolution? Because we always start this unit with the Declaration of Independence and its incredibly beautiful language about equality, it is so easy to just assume that once the British finally surrendered, boom, instant freedom and equality for every single person in America. But as good historical detectives, we have to look at the hard evidence, not just the mythology. So, the crucial point is that the historical evidence shows us a much more tragic reality. Rights were absolutely not guaranteed to all citizens. Those compromises made over slavery, they severely limited freedoms for millions of people and baked inequality right into the very foundation of the new government. Furthermore, marginalized groups, and we're talking about women, Native Americans, and enslaved people, were just entirely excluded from those early definitions of rights. The revolution achieved independence from Britain, yes, absolutely, but the society it created deeply struggled with and frequently failed at guaranteeing the equal rights it had so boldly promised. And that brings us to our final stop, Section 6, the final exit question. I really want to leave you all with this final provocative thought to chew on. Based on our evidence today, which constitutional compromise had the biggest consequence for how society defined rights? Think about the fierce debates over representation, the arguments over taxation, and of course, the devastating compromises over slavery. I challenge you to use that three-step works-response model we just practiced, make a claim, cite your evidence, and evaluate the consequence to answer this question for yourself. Because remember, history isn't just about memorizing what happened, it's about understanding why it happened and what those choices meant for the future. Thank you so much for exploring this unit with me today. Keep analyzing, keep questioning the evidence, and I will see you in the next explainer.